All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Student Success Stories featured by Maxwell Prep TV. Today we are going to be talking to Jaye Bullock, who is recently a graduated alumnus of Duke University and is now experiencing the post-grad life. So very excited to pick Jaye's brain about that. Jaye, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to you and just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. What did you study at Duke? Kind of vaguely, what are you up to now? We'll drill down even more specifically throughout this interview. And where are you from? And then the last thing I want you to touch on, and if you need reminders of these things, I'm gladly help you, is what are three ways that you would describe yourself? I'm asking everybody that I interviewed that because I just think it's a fun way for us to get to know you and break the ice.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, my name is Jaye Bullock. Use they, them pronouns. I recently graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Duke. Right now, I'm a supposed scientist, a aspiring actor, and a lover of life. And I guess I would describe myself as someone who is learning to be more comfortable in their own skin and learning to be more inquisitive about the world and learning how to assert themselves, insert and assert themselves in the world that we live in.
Awesome. I really like that, Jaye, because I feel like even something that I'm learning myself is, to own your voice in certain spaces. Sometimes when you feel outnumbered or you feel like you don't see a lot of people that you can relate to, you feel like your voice is kind of small. And so I can really relate to just you really embracing that and looking to find yourself and taking up space. So I really appreciate that. I think to get us into the meat of this conversation, I first want to ask you, what is kind of your family background, and do you feel like you have maybe learned or taken any values, important mantras, important life lessons from mentors, whether that's familial, friendly, whatever it is for you? Have you taken any of those kind of lessons, and how do you feel like that's shaped your life today or throughout college?
Yes. So, I mean, I had a fairly standard childhood, uh, lived with my mother and my sister, went to a pretty decent school, lived in the suburbs. But I will say that after my parents divorced, it became pretty apparent that I was going to need to figure out my own way to get to school and um, get my feet wet, get out in the world. And I think that um, both of my parents really instilled in me not only the value of hard work, but the value of not working too hard, not letting systems that do not function for you kind of rule up over your life, not letting too many of the daily issues that kind of crop up really dominate your psyche. They were always very encouraging of me and my sister. They said that pretty much as long as we could put our minds to it, we could do whatever we wanted. And I think that's kind of helped me to this day.
I keep forgetting I got to unmute myself. How do you feel like that sort of, I guess, not allowing, systems that don't work for you? Uh, Maybe that's even, yeah, like oppressive systems or things of that nature. How do you feel like that played into your Duke experience, if at all?
I feel like specifically at Duke, you really are going to have to figure out a way to carve out some space for yourself because there are a number of places um, just kind of on campus where you might not feel as though you're being heard, but there you might not feel as though you're being supported. So what I did is I was able to find myself several different groups which I could really be myself and learn and grow from, and know that if I had an issue, that the people around me were going to support me and help me. And more than that, you have to be kind of willing to do a little digging on your own to find spaces that will be conducive to your well-being and allow you to survive at a school that, um, as anybody who is currently attending Duke knows, is very intense, very competitive, and at times that can feel very isolating. So it's very important that once you arrive at university, that you kind of make sure that you have these support networks in place, I believe.
Do you think that there were like what were the, I guess, to dig even more specifically, what were those spaces um, for you? Was there like a specific group, a specific extracurricular, a specific professor or faculty member that you really connected with? I just want to kind of drill down a little bit.
Well, one place that I was able to kind of find a great deal of community was in my a cappella group. It was an all female group. They were all very lovely people, very kind, and wanted nothing more than to make sure you were there, was able to succeed both at Duke and in their personal pursuits. I think that was very important to me during my undergraduate journey. Aside from that, I mostly was able to kind of pick and choose my communities. I would make friends as I go, and I would kind of fall into the groups there. We would have little movie nights. We would go out exploring, and to have those little moments of joy really let me know that there were things that were that could be important that weren't just confined to a classroom or a textbook. There were people that cared about me beyond like some test score, some statistic. I thought that that connection that I had with my friends kind of meant the world to me. And with regards to the community space, this was towards the end of my academic career, but I was able to participate in a number of the events at the CSGD, and I was able
Wait,
to.
tell us what the CSGD is, just for people
Oh,
that
yes,
aren't familiar with Duke acronyms.
absolutely. So that is the Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity. It's primarily set up for LGBTQIA plus students, though anyone is allowed in, and they host a lot of different uh, events, and they would allow speakers to come and talk about their work as they try to advocate for social justice, for um, the human rights, for things of that nature. And so to have that space where people could kind of come and congregate and know that, you could be safe in your identity, I think that was very important to me. And then one other space that I admittedly did not stick with was the Black Student Alliance at Duke. I joined my freshman year, and it was really nice to see a whole bunch of talented Black folks trying to make space for their community on campus. I was able to assist with some of the events that were created at that time. Unfortunately, some of them were cut short by COVID, but yeah, I think that was also pretty pivotal for me because I growing up, I was pretty much in PWIs my whole life, and so it was nice to see um, a lot of like-minded Black folks in one space at one time, kind of just working towards a common goal. And it was nice to be able to be a part of that and not feel like I was a minority. It's kind of interesting at times, like knowing that you're the only Black person in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many questions came up for me, but we're going to take it one by one. I want to respond to some of the things that you said. And I think kind of going back to this idea, this theme that you brought up in the beginning about just like learning who you are, being comfortable in your own skin, feeling safe in your own skin, kind of embracing your identity. I think that there's something powerful about being in spaces where like you see other people who just like empower you because you can identify with them, you can relate to them. And so I think this is a lesson for people who are watching, that it is so okay. And it's actually something that I think both you and I encourage, to go and find spaces of community where you can be with your tribe. It's hard to, sometimes it takes a little bit of extra proactivity, going and being intentional about finding those spaces. But from the sounds of even just your story, there's something rewarding about being in those spaces, and just knowing like, hey, this person may have been afraid to kind of be like fully spread their wings and fully embrace their identity at one point in time, but look at where they are today, and that can be something that's inspiring. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And I think, well, a follow-up question that I have specifically about Black Student Alliance, because I've been to a couple events, but I've never fully found myself just like really integrated into that community, just because I stretch myself so thin with other things on campus that I got to pick and choose where I tend to dedicate my time. But I'm curious about why you decided to leave. You said, I think from the sounds of it, you said that was just kind of a freshman endeavor, and I'm interested in like what made you decide to kind of pursue a different space.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the end of that last question?
Yeah, I said, what, I guess like what made you decide to leave and like leave BSA, or just like not be as involved and go and pursue other spaces? Because I think there's a valuable lesson here about just like sometimes when a community is like no longer for you, or you're just like you're not finding like necessarily the meaning that you, sometimes I guess meaning can be exhausted in a certain place, and you're there for a season and not for a lifetime, or not for like an extended period of time. And so I guess I'm just curious, what was your specific reason for leaving?
Well, a couple things happened. As I don't know if I really emphasized this, but before the end of my freshman year, so while I was still in the BSA, we all got sent home due to COVID-19 restrictions. And so that next year I spent at home doing virtual college. That was an interesting experience. But following that, I I don't know, interestingly enough, I felt a bit of a stronger pull to come back towards some of my other friend groups, some of my other extracurriculars. It's not that I disliked the work in the BSA or that I had an adverse experience with any of the people. It's just I did not feel a call to come back. Additionally, I was able to find um, some other really cool Black folks to hang out with that wasn't a part of a very structured space. So personally, I didn't feel that I necessarily needed to be a part of the organization anymore. No particular reason.
Yeah, I think, and I figured that that's what you were going to say. And I think, like, for me, why that's encouraging, and what I want to sort of uplift about that is, I don't know, I personally felt like sometimes as people of color, there may be certain expectations that are placed on us where like we need to be in those spaces, or like we have to be there, or like that's what's like meant for us per se. And so like I think you having enough self-awareness to know, hey, like I have felt like a greater sense of community in another space, and you just like decided to go in a different direction. I think that there's something like there's flexibility, there's adaptability to that, but there's also just a level of self-awareness that I think is admirable, if you know where I'm coming from.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say that because even telling it now, I do feel a slight tinge of guilt. You know, here are these people who are trying to make it so that, if you don't have these other spaces on campus, that you are able to come into this area and know that you're not going to be singled out or made to feel separate because of your identity. But Yeah, I think it is good to know that you don't necessarily have to be representing the race all the time. You don't have to always be this strong and independent person. Sometimes you can just be and hang out with your friends and have a good time in college just to get some experience, you know?
Yeah, I relate to a lot of that, Jay. So I'm glad that seems like we were able to find some common ground there. And I want to tell you, I'm going into my senior year, and I don't think that there's any reason for you to feel um, a sense of guilt or anything like that. Like that kind of hurts me to know that you just are like, oh man, like maybe there's some like there's no reason for you to feel guilty, because I think like what those spaces are created for is for us to know that we people that look like us are capable of being successful in carving our own path, whatever that looks like. And it seems like that is something that you've done. And I know that I'm proud of you just from the limited amount of time that I've talked to you. And I know that people that you would have met in those spaces and other friends of color that you've made are also proud of you. So I think that there's no reason for you to feel bad or anything like that. Like you've just been following your heart and doing what's meaningful to you, and that that is inspirational and something to be proud of. So embrace that, okay?
Sure, I will.
Okay, awesome. So moving into a different direction, something I'm curious about is, so you said you majored in biology, right? Okay, and then you also did a cappella on campus,
I did.
and now you're aspiring like actor in the actor.
Possibly.
Okay, so
Possibly.
how did these interests come to be? Because those are like drastically different, Jay. Like that's like you want to be a scientist, but you're also really interested in the arts. Like, how did you come to that place of passion?
Well, for most of my K through 12 schooling, uh, STEM education was highly emphasized. And since I happened to like biology and I happened to be good at it, I thought it would be something to pursue. Additionally, I thought that it could possibly lead to a higher likelihood of me being able to pay my own bills. Unfortunately, of course, creativity is encouraged a lot of the time, but not as something that can actively sustain a lifestyle. But I think that's mostly because people aren't really told how it is possible to make it in what might be a non-traditional career. So, with STEM, with biology, was very clear what paths could be laid out for me. You could finish your undergrad and then go on to grad school and go to academia or go to industry. You might go off and become a teacher, or perhaps you could be even an educator on crash course. But there are a number of people who don't necessarily uh, want careers that are kind of set out for them, that have these nice, neat little milestones that you can look back and say, ah, yes, I have arrived here. And I think that once you start to lose the idea that you have to arrive somewhere, and that it might be even more rewarding to just kind of keep going and keep pushing through and seeing what you like and what you don't like, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I feel like that's something that can be exceptionally valuable to a person, especially if uh, you're one of those type A people that's like, I need to have these achievements to kind of prove my worth, to prove that I belong in a space that kind of deserve to exist as I do. And so I think that's something that I've kind of had to learn after I graduated, when I wasn't so worried about progressing to the next stage of my academic career. Now that I have to, now that I have kind of the rest of my life ahead of me, I kind of have to figure out my own path, what makes sense for me. And right now, what makes sense for me is trying to lean into my creative pursuits and creative interests. I don't know if this will be something that will be necessarily sustainable long term, but I want to at least try it. Why not?
So a couple of things. One, I really like this idea that you're propagating right now, where you don't have to be so consumed by this idea of arriving, because arrival makes it seem there's this connotation of, okay, I'm finished, like I'm done. I've done what I've needed to do. I've crossed the finish line. There's nothing else. And the way that I've really started to conceptualize my own journey is I'm forever unfolding. I'm forever blooming, right? Like there's something about those words that kind of relate to this idea of growth and stretching and reaching, where you're never done doing any of those things, right? Like there's never a moment where that's finished, where that's stopped, but it's an ongoing process. And I think what's really helpful about having that reframed mentality is I've found, going into now my fourth year at Duke, when you're surrounded by other high achieving people, it feels like the only way to keep up is when you're checking boxes and when you're living your life in terms of milestones, right?
Oh my
But like,
God, yes.
are you feeling that, Jay? Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, I'm getting flashbacks.
Yeah. And
Oh
so,
boy.
honestly, just to, and I'm going to have you comment more on that because it seems like you have some stuff to say, is like, you don't have to check these milestones or these boxes to like keep up. Like, we're all on our own path, we're all unfolding at our own pace, right? And so I think when you start conceptualizing your life as that, you start realizing, like, I kind of like to think of it as cars, Jay. Like, we all got different engines, we're all driving at different speeds. Some of us are a little bit more energy conscientious than others, some of us are louder than others. Like, there's no point in comparing, right? We come in different colors, brands, whatever. And so, yeah, that really resonated with me. I want to pass it back to you because it seemed like I was triggering something. So, what was going on in your head when I was saying that?
Yeah, so I think for a long time I really did tie my self-worth to my academic achievements and accolades. And that just kind of sets you up for failure. Like, I'm not sure that this is necessarily going to be true of every major, but when I entered into my first semester, it quickly became apparent that I was not quite as gifted as I thought I was. But I didn't realize at the time, of course, was completely fine. It just meant that I was at a slightly different stage than some of my peers, that I might uh, need to take advantage of different resources in order to succeed, and I might need to take a different path in order to, feel fulfilled. So I, it's really interesting because I've only really started to look back and realize how much time and energy I wasted comparing myself to others. And despite all that negativity, I came out fine. I have matriculated. So I guess thing I would say is just to try your best and to know that once you have tried your best, that's kind of all you can do, and that's fine. And you might not be the best at everything you do, and that's fine. And you might not succeed at everything on your first or your 51st try, and that's also fine. It's just a matter of being able to figure out what is necessary to make life work for you.
Jay, this is just hitting a little too deep for me. Like, it's so real, and like, I really relate to this just like constant comparison to other people and constantly like, I don't know if you feel like this, but I have to actively check my brain to like not size somebody else up and be like, okay, like how do I compare to them? Like, what are their gifts? What are their talents? How does that, should I be intimidated? Am I threatened? And like, if we start approaching this world from a place of like, am I giving my best? If you can honestly say, just like you said, that you are giving your best effort to a particular thing, that is all that matters. Like, I'm going to be fully transparent. I applied for this scholarship when I was in college to pay for grad school, to go towards law school. And I put everything into this application: blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice time with my friends. And I didn't end up getting it. And I was so upset and so mad because I thought, like, this is a reflection of me being a worse student than these other people that advanced to the next round. Like, maybe I'm just not as good enough, not as good enough as so and so. But when I honestly stopped and reflected and said, did I give my best effort to this? And the answer was yes. That's all that matters. And even if our best still results in failure, you can still be happy with the fact that you tried with everything that you could. So I feel like we're spitting facts right now, Jay. You know what I mean?
I think so.
I am curious about what, like, I guess, how have your parents been supportive of kind of your post grad uh, interest in pursuing more creative, artistic pursuits, or kind of what has your relationship been with your parents on that front? If
Oh,
if you feel comfortable
absolutely.
sharing.
Yeah, I've told them about my current thoughts on what I want to do post grad, and they seem pretty chill with it. They're pretty encouraging of the steps that I'm taking currently. We'll see how it works out when I get a little bit more serious about this pursuit. As of right now, I'm doing an internship, so that comes first. But yeah, they've been fairly supportive of me in this endeavor, and they've been encouraging. Like, I've been working on this working crew on this one show through some community theater in Durham. And yeah, my mom was asking me when we opened, and was like, oh, oh my gosh, I hope y'all do well. And my dad was like, I'm so glad that you're able to uh, engage with your creative side, and just to enjoy it. Uh, yeah.
So I feel like, one, I'm really grateful that you've had that experience with your parents, because I feel like there are people out there, who their parents are just like, hey, you're not pursuing this particular path, you know, I don't want to stand by you. And I guess, I know you can't speak directly to this, but do you have any advice for people that feel like they're not living up to what their parents want for them? They're pursuing a different type of path and their parents aren't supportive, or they feel afraid to tell their parents about what they're doing because they don't think their parents are going to be encouraging. Like, what do you have? Do you have anything to say to those people?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a couple questions you have to ask yourself. One thing is, well, not a couple, but a few. Are you happy? Is this working? Is it hurting anybody else? Does it affect anybody else but me? Because, ultimately, it's your life. You're going to be the one that kind of looks back over your life and thinks about all the things you accomplished, all the things you avoided. So ultimately, I think that you have to be able to, at a certain point, draw a boundary between someone else's idea of what your future should be and what your future could be, or what you want to shape up to be. because so many people will tell you you've got to be this, you've got to do this to be successful. Oftentimes they'll do it out of love, but I think that can kind of be stifling sometimes, to feel as though there is only one acceptable mode of success. So you just have to make sure that you're not living for someone else, because, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of your life, it's just going to be you. It's not going to be anybody else.
Jay, I think that's real. I think that's real. You summed it up perfect. You said that for anybody else, your parents aren't living your life. Your parents aren't chasing your dream, and um, I just, I really like those kind of checkpoint questions that you laid out. And I also think sometimes, and this isn't always possible, um, but I have people in my life who push back and challenge me on some of the choices that I make because they're trying to make sure I'm doing what's best for me. And that's good to a certain extent. Like, I don't want to be surrounded by voices that are always like, go, 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 if there are really problems, and things that I should be considering. But I also think that there's a certain point where sometimes you just got to set boundaries with those people who aren't supporting your dreams. If you know that your dreams are like working for you, making you happy, not hurting anybody else, only affecting like you kind of thing. I think sometimes you just got to set boundaries and maybe even say like, hey, if you can't get on board with this, like, so also, I don't know, Jay, did I cut out there for a minute or you can still hear me?
Just a little bit, you did.
Okay, I was just gonna say like because there was like a really loud truck that passed, so I was like I don't know if Jay heard me. But essentially I was just saying like yeah, sometimes you got to set boundaries with those people, or even cut some of those people out of your life if they're really being an anchor, um, holding you back. I My next question for you has to do with your internship that you brought up. How did you go about securing your internship? Like, what did that look like? I guess your senior year applying, and what does your life look like now? Kind of like, what's a day in the life of Jay as a working professional?
Well, I'm not sure I'm quite the working professional that you've described me as. This internship is through Duke. It's focusing on clinical research. So I am learning about current best practices in the field of study, as well as learning from various physicians about how they were able to get to the positions that they have uh, risen to, as well as their day-to-day operations. I'm also doing a little bit of a research project myself, focusing on interventions to help encourage treatment adherence uh, for individuals who are both African American and have asthma. So, regarding securing the internship, I knew in my junior year that I could not go straight to grad school. So, I figured that I had probably better find something to occupy that gap year. So, I went looking around, looking at uh, programs such as the NIH's PrEP program, looking at uh, both jobs in my home state of Tennessee and here, and then I stumbled upon this internship, and I honestly am not. I can't quite remember exactly at which point I found this one, but I was able to find the website for this particular opportunity, um, most likely through looking for good opportunities for students who were into sciences and taking a gap year. And I was drawn to this one because it's a fairly short program, a 6 month program. So I thought that that would give me a time to take a step back and get a feel for what I might actually want to do with my degree, if anything at all. So um, I also was drawn to this because it was a slightly different realm of study than what I was accustomed to, much more interacting with uh, people and patients rather than cells and tissue cultures. So I mostly just kind of looked around everywhere. And once I found an opportunity that best suited my needs, I looked at the application requirements and uh, tried to get everything in. And luckily, it worked out. But there is one website that I would recommend. There's something called Pathways to Science. Um, it's where I was able to find the summer internship that I did before my senior year. And you can filter results based on region, based on stage in your academic career, based on your interest in any area of STEM. And you can find both um, the opportunity itself, when the deadline is. And I felt that that was fairly helpful in uh, trying to get a handle on what I could do, uh, both while I was in school and when I was coming out of school.
What does your schedule look like each day? Because I know we're moving towards a world where like remote work and work from home and all that is becoming more popularized. But I'm especially asking for me, I'm about to graduate in a year and I'm kind of just like, is it as scary as they say it is to be an adult, Jay? Like, I'm like, I just want to stay in school, but I know that I want to take a couple years off before I too go to graduate school. So what's kind of your take on that?
So I have had a fairly easy time of it because my parents are very supportive of me and I was able to find relatively cheap housing. So with those factors, I have can say that adulthood has actually kind of been a sigh of relief for me. It's not been as high stress as I felt that college was. And it's not so much frightening so much as there are a number of new things to remember, when to get groceries, if you don't have a car, trying to navigate public transit, trying to make time with your friends who are no longer just like hop and a skip and a jump from your dorm. So there are simply a number of new things to navigate. But I think that with a great deal of support, it is not something that's like an insurmountable task to figure out how to navigate.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. That is very encouraging, but I also think like you validated some of my fears of like, oh, I gotta go grocery shopping instead of just go to the dining hall. Like that sucks, and I don't like cooking. Um, or even something I worry about too is just like no longer having as close of relationships with my friends because you're right, there's not that easy, accessible, close proximity that we're used to. But it sounds like you've been making it work and that it's not as scary as I'm making it out to be.
But it
Again,
definitely depends on your situation. I mean, like how's it? Rent is so expensive nowadays. So even that is just a major stressor on your psyche. If you're going through that and you're also um, maybe got issues with your family, maybe you've got issues with a partner, maybe you even have like a child of your own and you're juggling that. Maybe you've gotten out of school and you don't know what you want to do, and that's terrifying because you now have a degree that no longer serves you. There are a number of factors that go into making adulthood what it is. So I'm not going to just sit here and say, oh, yes, it's a breeze. I'm just saying that there is a great deal of freedom in uh, not necessarily having to arrive anywhere, just try and make sure that you can uh, sustain yourself and be where you need to be.
So a few follow-up questions with you. I know I asked you a lot of questions at once, so I know it's probably hard to keep track, but I am still curious about what your schedule looks like kind of on a day-to-day. Do you work a 9 to 5? Do you go into like an office or a site on each campus, or usually work from your apartment, or what does that look like?
Sure. So it actually depends on the day. We are doing a lot of didactics, which are essentially training meetings in which we learn about different aspects of uh, clinical research and community work that is going on in Durham, which is where I'm stationed right now. Um, so that will typically be for a few hours, and after which I will come home and, after relaxing a little bit, work on my research project. For the most part, it is a bit of a remote project. I'm working on it with a partner, and we communicate with our mentor um, every every week, typically, to kind of keep her updated on our progress. And hopefully, by the end of this, we'll have a product or a new insight that will be useful in trying to help patients with asthma, and um, hopefully that will go off without a hitch, but we will see.
Okay, there was an ambulance going. I'm waiting on it to pass. Okay, the sirens are off. I was gonna ask, my last couple of questions is one, I know you said that you're going to, the grad school is in the cards for you. Am I correct about that?
Possibly. I'm keeping my options open.
Okay, so I guess how did you arrive at that decision of like, okay, I'm thinking about going to grad school, and what would you be going to grad school for? And what, like, I guess, what was your reason for not going straight into grad school? Because I know, at least at Duke, a lot of people just go straight into whatever they're doing next with no break in between. So yeah, those are kind of what I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah, well, the reason I didn't go straight to grad school was that my mental health was absolute hell. And I thought that trying to become an adult while also living in the in a stressful environment that I knew would not be conducive to like my success, I just thought that I needed to get a few things resolved before I tried to go further in higher education. Um, with regards to that education, I'm thinking about a master's in public health. Actually, been kind of inspired by this internship, seeing the work that these physicians and community workers and oh gosh, research coordinators are doing. I think it's a pretty admirable pursuit, and I think I'd like to be a part of that.
Well, for one, I'm glad to hear that. Well, okay, having mental health problems sucks. I've been there. I'm there. I know what that's like. And I guess what I wanted to say about that is I think you having enough self-awareness to know like, hey, what can I take on in a particular moment? What is going to be conducive to my happiness and my thriving? And you're like, hey, graduate school is just not that. I think there's a powerful lesson to learn there too about just being in tune with what your body says it needs. And sometimes that's just rest and staying in Durham and doing an internship and waiting and not rushing straight into what you think is that next milestone, right? This goes back to that idea about unfolding and allowing your life to take its path at its own pace. So I appreciate you sharing about that. And I think if you do decide to go to graduate school, that sounds like a really powerful area that you're wanting to make a meaningful impact. And just from the limited conversation that I've had with you, just being able to learn your character and your heart, I think you'll be really good at that. But I'm also rooting to see you on Broadway or something. I'm like, hey, if Jay ends up doing any sort of acting or something, that would be really cool too. So my last
Well,
question
we'll
for
see
you.
about that.
No, Jay, I'm here. I'm supporting you. I believe in you. Whatever you put your mind to, you can do it. Okay.
Okay.
My last question for you is for the people that are watching, what is one last piece of advice or lesson or phrase or something that you want to leave us with, that can kind of just wrap things up and be a nice take home message?
Find your people. Because once you find your people, it'll be a lot easier to find yourself, I think. Because it won't necessarily be you putting up a front to please anybody. It'll just be you hanging out with people who you like and who like you and who want you to succeed. And you want the same thing for them. I think that's probably the most important thing that you've got to get drilled in your brain. Uh, Honestly, even before you go to college or before you pursue any sort of anything in this adult life. So
I think that is a great lesson, and it connects back to what we were saying earlier about finding your tribe. I know that my best friends and my family, something that is the reason that they are as close to me and I've let them in as close as I have, is because they are the people that I don't have to pretend with. Those fronts, those facades, all of that is torn down because I know that they will see me, accept me, and love me for exactly who I am. And there's something, just like you said, about when you find your people, you can find yourself. Yourself is between all those, like it's under all those masks. That's who the real Jay is. That's who the real Mackenzie is. And like when you are with people who nurture you being that unmasked, raw, true version of yourself, there's something to that. So I think that's a really great lesson you're leaving us with. And I just want to thank you so much, Jay, for your time and your vulnerability and you just being willing to impart some knowledge about, the post-grad life, your life. And this has been a pleasure for me to talk to you. And I'm just grateful for the ways you're giving back to the community and supporting me in my endeavors. So I really appreciate you.
yes, thank you for having me. You've been a lovely host.
Thanks, Jay. All right, I will see you soon. We are going to close out this podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.